This week, it's a double interview episode. First, we welcome John Bruggeman, consulting CISO at CBTS, to take a look inside the CISO's office. Then we welcome Brandon Dunlap, leadership partner at Gartner, to discuss the board's role in cybersecurity. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly.
Right now, everybody is talking about cryptocurrency, and the criminals are hiding in the conversation. Cyber criminals use social engineering, loaded with urgency and fear, to successfully prey on your company, your employees, and your customers. Spear phishing is just one of 13 types of email threats. Barracuda has identified these 13 types and shows you how to protect your company, your customers, and your reputation. Find out about the 13 email threat types and Barracuda email protection. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
It's time to rethink how we approach cybersecurity because the reality is modern cyber attackers are already past your initial defenses. ExtraHop helps your security team find and eradicate advanced threats before real damage is done. Protect your enterprise and customers with better defense. Learn more about how ExtraHop stops advanced threats at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. That's extra HOP. Monitoring and maintaining compliance is a never-ending struggle with a high price of failure. Firemon helps customers meet complex and varying compliance requirements. Firemon has fully customizable reporting, analytics, assessments, and dashboards to meet the compliance needs of any organization. With Firemon, compliance reports take a tenth of the time, and real-time continuous compliance eliminates the anxiety and headaches of audit preparation. Improve security outcomes by improving security operations with Firemon. Visit securityweekly.com/Firemon to learn more.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 266, recorded June 17th, 2022. I'm your host, Matt Alderman, staying cool in the 100-degree Texas heat. Joining remotely are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Ben Carr, also in the Texas heat.
Yep, joining here in Austin, Matt. How's it going today?
Good. It's a great day up here. It's hot, but it's good.
Yeah.
Also joining me this week is Joe South, our newest addition to the Cyber Risk Alliance team. Welcome, Joe, to Business Security Weekly.
Thanks for having me. It's pretty hot in Chicago as well.
I bet it is. Join us June 29th for a webcast with Tyler Robinson and Bo Bullock to learn how to pivot into the world of crypto security. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to register with only your name and email. Don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings by visiting securityweekly.com/on-demand. John is a veteran technologist, CTO, and CISO with nearly 30 years of experience building and running enterprise IT and shepherding information security programs towards maturity based on industry standards like ISO 27000 and the NIST CSF. John has several GIAC certifications and has been active in the local information security community through groups like InfraGard and the Higher Education Security Council for EDUCAUSE. He holds a BS and MA from Xavier University and has served as an adjunct professor at both Xavier and the University of Cincinnati. John, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Now, I don't know if you knew this, but I grew up in the state of Ohio, born and raised up in Fremont, straight up 75. Spent a good portion of my career over in Cleveland. Used to get down to the Cincinnati area occasionally, but haven't been back in a while. Start us out by who is CBTS and the role you play there at CBTS.
Certainly. Yeah, CBTS is the, I would call it the value-added reseller and integration MSP consulting arm of a larger holding company that consists of Cincinnati Bell. Well, it used to be called Cincinnati Bell. It's now changed its name to Alta Fiber. And Hawaiian Telecom, and Onex, which is a managed service provider out of Canada. So there's 4 large companies. CBTS is one of the 4. We provide the services arms. We have a cloud security practice. We have a cloud practice. We can sell you hardware. We can sell you software. And we're about a $800 million company with about 1,500 people. And my role is basically to help the customers that don't have a very mature security program. I help them bring that security program forward into the maturity scale. So that way, they might be a smaller, an SMB market company where they're, 500 or fewer employees, and they know they should be doing more things with security and they're not doing them yet. I've also worked with larger organizations that have a mature program, but they just want somebody to bounce security ideas off of. In my 20 years in IT security, it's just amazing how much more information is out there, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years. I mean, the nice thing is having somebody that you can talk security with. And I really enjoy security, which some people might think is a little odd, but I just enjoy helping people mature their security programs.
We're odd with you, John. We all like security as well. Just saying.
Yes. I feel like I'm one of the clan.
Yes, you fit in fine right here. Don't worry, you're all good. Now, one of the things we were talking about in the prep up to this was, you said we're going to talk about inside the CISO's office. What does the CISO do on a daily basis? Before we go there, one of the things you outlined in your descriptions was the need for a CISO, or do I need a CISO? You were describing this a little bit in your introduction here. Organizations that don't have large employee groups, do they even need a CISO? Like, how do you determine whether you need a CISO or don't need a CISO? Like, give us kind of the initial thoughts, and what are you seeing in the industry when it comes to the CISO role?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, if you're a company with probably 100 or fewer employees, it's unlikely you're going to need a full-time CISO. I mean, hopefully you can put enough controls in place that your security does not require day-to-day, what I would call care and feeding. But if you are a 500 or larger employee, depending on what you're doing too. I mean, if you're a manufacturing company and you have 50 people in the office and you have 450 people out on the floor making something, you probably don't need a CISO either. You need some really good controls. But if you're, 500 and above and you've got, say 1,000 people in your marketing and sales organization, and they have access to sensitive or personally identifiable information, and you have regulatory controls that you have to worry about, you are probably moving into that size of an organization that needs to have someone on a day-to-day basis managing your security controls and making sure you're doing the right things, and having what we frequently call eyes on glass. So the CISO may not be the one with eyes on glass, but you may have outsourced that to a managed service provider who's going to do your managed detection and response. But somebody's got to pay attention, because there will be business needs, there will be, administrative needs for determining whether or not something somebody wants to do in the organization is appropriate for the particular security posture that your company needs, and whether or not there's somebody in your organization, keeping an eye on the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, maintaining compliance, maintaining regulatory controls, things like that. So it's the smaller the company, the less likely you need someone full-time, and more likely you'll need what I would call a fractional CISO, which I do as well. So I help people not just improve their security program, but I can function as a fractional CISO for a smaller organization that doesn't need somebody full-time.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Now, when we think about the role of the CISO and the day-to-day activities, right? You again, you touched on this, but I want to go deeper now, because now we go inside the office of the CISO, and in your descriptions, it's not all about eating bonbons and reading the Wall Street Journal, which I thought was cute, because I was like, yeah, I wish I could do that. Like,
yes,
can I get one of those?
Wouldn't
jobs?
That be nice?
It's what we all do now.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly right.
I would imagine some people who are not in the day-to-day security space have a perception that there's not much happening in the security world, which, as those of us that are active in the security space recognize, that the threats are continuously evolving, and the risks because of business integration, third party or supply chain risk is huge. When you think about the last year itself, if you go back a little bit more than a year, say 15 months, you've got SolarWinds, you've got Kaseya, you've got what we call supply chain threats. So you may have outsourced some of your day-to-day computer operations because you wanted to focus on what was important for your business. Let's say you're a consulting company and you're consulting in hotels or some kind of other service industry, and your day-to-day business is not running your IT operation, so you outsource it to an MSP. Well, if that MSP is targeted by threat actors, some people would call them criminals. If they're acting on the part of a government, we tend to call them threat actors because we don't think of that as being criminal per se, but a lot of us would just call them criminals. The managed service providers are a huge target for criminal operations and threat actors because you can hit one company and then infect 500, 1,000 other companies because that managed service provider has the controls and the access, to those other companies that they're providing service for. So you've really got to keep your eyes open to see what threats are out there. So the day-to-day operations of a CISO, when you're sitting in that chair, are evaluating the risks, evaluating the vulnerabilities that are there in your organization. One of my regular recommendations to virtually any organization is make sure you do monthly vulnerability scans. Besides the first two things that you should have literally at your fingertips would be an inventory of the assets that you have and an inventory of the software that's supposed to be on those assets. So how many computers are connected to your network and what software should they have on it? If you don't know the answer to those two questions, you're going to have a problem determining whether or not your machines are infected or whether or not somebody has added a machine to your environment and you don't know it. So, there's, vulnerability scanning is one of the first things I recommend after they've done an inventory of their hardware and software assets.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, you bring up a couple of points there, but I think I'm always fond of saying you can outsource the work, but you can't outsource the risk. And I think foundationally, when you think about company size and smaller organizations that maybe don't yet have a CISO or haven't evolved to that point, I think a lot of people perceive it as a technical role. And it's not really technical, right? There's a lot of advice and consultation that the CISO can give to the rest of the business on how to operate, but it certainly is challenged. The lower your revenue, the more unlikely you are to have somebody who's handling that risk position.
Oh, without a doubt. In a perfect world, you would want to do a risk assessment of your environment to say, what data do I have that could be at risk when we're thinking of it purely from an information security standpoint. But I also help people with disaster recovery and business continuity plans, because if you are a single site and you only have one data center and your data all resides in that building and you get hit with a tornado like Maysville, Kentucky did in December, and the town is half wiped off the map, what are you going to do for, there was a candle factory that was hit, what is that building? What is that, the building's gone. So what is that manufacturer doing to replace that manufacturing capacity? And not to mention the orders and order fulfillment and, accounts receivable, accounts payable. So there's definitely business elements to it. It's not a pure technical role. There are technical aspects of it that I would certainly encourage people to know. You want to know whether or not a vendor can actually do what they're promising to do. That's a different story altogether. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of business elements to a chief information security officer role.
Yeah, you brought up the risk management side of this, which we talk a lot about on this show, right? Security. If the CISO isn't managing the business risk, then the CISO is going to report to the risk officer ultimately, right? Because at the end of the day, this is a risk issue, right?
Yep.
And I think the challenge on the risk side, and you talked about this as well, as the basics, like what hardware and software, where my data, where's my key data elements, back to this risk assessment, right? Without understanding your systems and the data on those systems and how critical they are to the business, how am I ever going to understand where the most risk is in my environment, right? So these elements tied together, they seem so foundational, but yet, holy cow, as an industry, we've struggled around just the basics of asset management for 20 plus years.
Like longer than that.
Right. Like,
for those of us that have been in the business for 30 years, we've wrestled with that for over 30 years, but yes. Yeah. So, I mean, your point is valid, and it goes towards the quick adoption of technology by a lot of businesses. Frequently, IT is looked at as, I can just throw some money at IT, they'll buy something, some particular tool or more computers, and magically you'll get additional either efficiency or productivity based on throwing some capital at what is sort of a perceived problem. I haven't run into that many organizations in my 30-year career where they have strategically looked at what they're trying to do and invested based on that strategy. It's sad, but true. I mean, I'm sure companies out there that do it, but I haven't had the luck of engaging with them very often.
So I have a bit more of a question. So in your opinion, what's the best way to tackle this problem for smaller companies? Because what I've encountered in the past is that, smaller companies, they don't have a CISO, like you said. They don't maybe not necessarily need one, but they also don't have anyone that's focused on security, which is a huge issue, because all of these topics that we're talking about, the security person, they'll typically have a mindset that'll be paying attention to asset management. They'll be paying attention to vulnerability management. And without that, there is literally no one. You'll have developers spinning up and down servers constantly, having encryption keys and things that they shouldn't be. I've experienced it firsthand myself.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say for that smaller company that we'll just say they're, up to 100 employees, they don't need someone full-time, but they need someone thinking about security. And that is where a fractional CISO, I mean, I work with people 1 hour a week. I mean, it doesn't take that long to say, now that's 1 hour that I would sit with them and talk about XYZ topic that we have developed a roadmap for this particular company for 12 months, and then a 24-month roadmap and a 36-month roadmap to say, these are the things we're going to accomplish in the next 12 months. And one of my clients, that's exactly what we did. We had 10 things that we wanted to accomplish. We started in May of 2021. We got 9 of the 10 accomplished. The 10th one will be accomplished when some other assets are retired in the end of June. So it doesn't require full-time by any stretch. Fractional work can work really well for that. And like you said, if there isn't somebody thinking about it, then people are going to just do whatever they want. And the cost of some of these software as a service solutions are so low. You can buy a Linode server for $5 a month, and you could spin up Linux on it, and you then could put sensitive information on it unbeknownst to anybody else in the organization. And that could be a huge risk to the organization in terms of lost intellectual property, or something, hey, go to this web server that I spun up off Linode for $5, and you can get access to XYZ information, which could be a huge security risk. And then if the person just separates from the company for whatever reason, you've lost access to that server because the credentials could be lost. I mean, it becomes a real pain in the neck. And I dealt with that because the faculty where I used to work, they could spin up whatever they wanted. You couldn't tell them no because they had tenure, and it was one of the most difficult places to enforce any kind of security controls because of the general sort of desire to allow academic freedom. So faculty could do just about anything. Wow. So it is troublesome. It's hard to manage.
Yeah, for sure. Now you've outlined some of the kind of the fundamental CIS controls, right? I mean, you need to do a hardware and software inventory. You need to do basic vulnerability scanning. You should really understand, kind of do a risk assessment, understand where your risks are. I mean, is that Is that a really good guide for smaller companies to use? Look, I love the NIST cybersecurity framework. Absolutely love it. I think it breaks it down. But for organizations that are smaller, it's too much. Like
I agree,
too
100%.
much, right? And so do you go back to the kind of the core CIS top 10 controls and use that as a guide for these organizations? Like, if you can just do these 10 basic things, you'll be in much better shape.
Yes, without a doubt. I use both CIS controls. One of the companies I helped out, we used Implementation Group 1 because they were beginning their security journey, and we could have tried to evaluate them at Implementation Group 2, or we could have tried to use NIST Cybersecurity Framework, the CSF. That would have just overwhelmed them, and it would not have given them, I would describe it as confidence or a desire even to say, when you're given a list, if you're assessed against the NIST Cybersecurity Framework and you have over 100 controls, over 130 controls, and you discover that you're deficient essentially in 120 of the 130, let's say, that's depressing. I mean, that's not good. It doesn't encourage someone to try and improve their environment unless they have a real big stick behind them saying, thou shalt become NIST Cybersecurity Framework compliant. CIS controls are great. I mean, they're very easy to understand, very easy to consume. I find them much more approachable for the non-technical, non-security focused person. And they're available. They're free. Anybody could go to CIS controls, just Google it right now, and you'll see the controls that they make available to the broader community. And I am a huge fan of trying to improve the cybersecurity posture of everybody, because I can tell you in 2001, when I was running my itty bitty network at this college, we got hit with a distributed denial of service attack that took us offline for obvious reasons, because we were running off of a dual channel ISDN circuit, and suddenly the mail server goes down on a Sunday afternoon, and I go into the office and say, why isn't the mail server? Does it have to be rebooted? And there's 10 voicemail messages, and the first message is from the Department of Defense saying, why have you scanned 1.2 million of our computers? And I'm going, first, I'm sure I didn't. Second, how did they get my number? And third, who else is called? And then you find out it's the Department of Energy and the Department of Health and Human Services. That's a week of my life I'll never get back. So it was a huge indication that you're only as secure as your weakest link, which is trite but true. And I want to make sure that people improve their cybersecurity as much as possible.
It's funny. I was just looking up the CIS controls because I haven't gone out there in a while, right? Because when I was building policy compliance for Qualys back in the day, we used the CIS benchmarks constantly, right? That's how we wrote our configuration management scripts. It is now 18. So it was 20. They decreased the number down to 18. I remember when it was like 10. I think it was the CIS top 10 or something like that.
It was the top 10, yeah. I mean, it was SANS top 10 as well, yeah.
Right. So now it's 18 controls. All right. So, I'm curious whether you need all 8. Yeah, probably do. I'm scrolling down below.
Implementation Group 1 doesn't even imply all 18, and there are sub-controls underneath the 18. So, starting out with CIS is a great step for companies that are, between 10 employees and 500 even, because they're applicable. They work. They're good controls.
Yeah, it's good. We talked a lot about the CISO role and kind of the steps. What do we miss? When I think back to the role,
staffing, risk.
Probably staffing and retention and training and some of those things, right? Because
business engagement, making sure people don't think that it's all just, I continue to run into organizations where they think that security is an IT problem, and it's not. Obviously, it's you want to get consciousness raising, you want to security and awareness, whatever phrase you want to use, you want to make sure that there's buy-in at the top, whether from the board or from the C-level, the C-suite or the organization writ large, to say, it isn't just an IT problem. We're not just going to push it off onto the guys in IT and say that they have to fix this so that way I don't have to think about security. We all have to think about security. It's a big enough problem and it's pervasive enough that everybody has to play their part. Now, not everybody has to know what the CIS controls are. Not everybody has to know what CIS is, Center for Information Internet Security. But everybody has to say, if we could get everyone to stop and think, just think for a moment before they click on a link, we would improve the security posture for every organization across the world. Don't just click on that link. I mean, we all know that that's a lot of the ways that the threat actors get in is they craft a really, engaging email that makes you want to click on some link that you shouldn't click on.
Yeah. Yes. And no matter how much asset inventory I have and software and secure configurations, I'm still going to do, I'm still going to have some user click on the link, right? And all the things that you just did kind of. You
could have a SIM tool, you could have the best EDR, you could have the best, managed detection and response. And it's still, if your end users are not trained enough and have not taken ownership and do not participate fully as saying we're part of the solution, I don't want to point the finger, and I certainly don't want to make my users feel that they're the problem. I mean, that's self-defeating almost when you start the conversation that way. I was a big fan, I still am a big fan of positive reinforcement. When people would send me a phishing email and say, hey, John, is this legit? I love to be able to say right back to them, great for spotting that, good job, keep it up, stay alert, the threats are out there. I didn't want them to think that we're constantly under attack, even though we were constantly under attack, because I don't want people completely paranoid. I want them alert, shields up, just like, CISO says, shields up. One of my colleagues here, Justin Hall, said, when are our shields not up? And it's like, yes, in information security, your shields are always up. But there are times when they're up a little higher, that sort of a thing. So,
right. Well, and I mean, it's trying to identify those potential heightened times for your employees to also know, like, we're going to be a little extra due diligence over the next couple months because we see all this craziness going on, in Russia, Ukraine, or wherever in the world that it's happening, right? And so, to your point, right, you don't want people to be paranoid, but when there is a heightened sense of activity, there should be a heightened sense in at least trying to get your employees to be a little more diligent during certain time frames. But if you could do it all the time, that would be great. But, again, there's a balance act there, John. I think that's part of the challenge for most organizations is how do you balance that, stay alert all the time, but not freak them out and make them paranoid all the time at the same time.
Right. And the thing that I found most helpful, and this was interesting because I ran a cybersecurity awareness program for 5 years. It's still running as far as I know, at the other organization, but I tried the traditional awareness and training. It's computer based, it's animated, you click on this, read this, audio. And I never got anybody, I think I tried to make it as mandatory as possible, but I had no stick. It was all carrot. And, maybe I'd get 30 people to, do some of the training. And, even with reporting saying, hey, your department only had, 5 people out of the 10 do it, or whatever the number were. What I found to be the most successful was, it was the drama-based information. I won't call it infotainment, but it was drama-based, really well-produced stories, which at the end had 2 or 3 nuggets of information security. Don't tailgate, and make sure you ask for somebody's ID before you let them into your office. Standard operating procedure, what some of us who just think that way naturally is not the way that a lot of people think. I mean, and if you're in customer service, you're not incentivized to be challenging. You're incentivized to be helpful. So some of our best people on the help desk are the same people that get, you run a video off of YouTube that has a crying baby in the background, and then I call up and say, yeah, I'm trying to reset my cell phone. I just bought this cell phone and the SIM card doesn't work. And can you know, you can do a storyboard, you know, with a crying baby in the background that's just a YouTube video, and you can get some of those help desk people on that front line to do a SIM card swap. You don't want them to,
right?
But you can understand why they do it. Yeah. So it's a constant effort.
Constant effort, and that is the key takeaway. This is a constant effort. John, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you. Pleasure to join.
We're going to take a quick break and then welcome Brandon Dunlap from Gartner. Stay tuned.